Believe it or not, is a Steelers playoff edition of Madden Benz Unfiltered, brought to you by Rush to Crush Cancer. More than a ride, it's a mission. Join us on Sunday, May 19th for the Rush to Crush Cancer bike ride. Whether you're a cycling enthusiast, just love the mission, or you're a part of a group, we have a course for you. We've all been affected by cancer in one way, shape, or form, so register today. Go to rushtocrushcancer.org. rushtocrushcancer.org, and help us in the fight against cancer. All the proceeds stay right here in the Pittsburgh area. Tim Benz and Mark Madden. You can listen to Mark Monday through Friday, 3 until 6 on 105.9 The X. You can listen to me on the pregame show on DVE for the Steelers, which will continue for another week because the Steelers are still playing. It's something I didn't see happen, Mark. I fully admit it. I was wrong. I had them cooked at 7-7. But you know what? I was also spot on when I had them 10-7, third place in their own division, and making it as a wild card. It was just a strange route to a very predictable result for the Steelers.
If they'd have played Mason Rudolph earlier, they might have won 11 or 12 games. If they had not clung to the idea that Mitch Trubisky should get first chance when Pickett got hurt, they would definitely be an 11 or 12 win team. That said, I don't think they're very good. I don't think the NFL is very good. I just think they happen to hit a good streak at an opportune time with an unlikely quarterback. Unless, of course, he's a likely quarterback, and unless this is the real Mason Rudolph, and then maybe they can make a fist of it against the Bills, but I rather doubt it.
I get your point about the NFL not being as good, maybe even as last year. I don't think the AFC is. I think the fact that the Ravens sprouted up as much as they did this year. And granted, they've had Lamar healthy for the entire season, and that's a big deal. But, Buffalo has backslid. Obviously, the Chiefs have backslid. The Jaguars never became what we thought they were going to be this year.
They were going to wind up with the number one seed. I thought playing in that division, they would just, go 6-0 in that division and kind of tread water to get to 12 wins.
Well, that's kind of where I'm going with it too. Is that the AFC South is as bad as we thought it was going to be, except for the fact that Houston turned out this slightly better team than the rest of the division when we all thought it was going to be Jacksonville. And strangely enough, here's another weird way the Steelers got to where they are to get into the playoffs. They go 5-1 against their own division, which everybody was over 500 for the first time since 1935. And they were 1-3 against the South, and that's what almost cost them. Thankfully, the worst team in the South got the Steelers in with Tennessee's victory over Jacksonville.
That's unusual, Tim, but their record against the AFC North is kind of fool's gold, too. What with Burrow getting hurt and Deshaun Watson getting hurt, and they don't have to play Lamar in the season finale. So the Steelers had a lot of breaks go their way to get to 10-7. I would think that goes without saying.
I'll give you another weird thing here. Their strength of victory, like the teams that they beat, was the best in the entire AFC. But they also lost to 3 non-playoff teams in DTR, basically a third-string quarterback with the Browns. So that's how they got themselves in a position where they were praying for help again. But I didn't think it would be possible this year to be a 10-win team and have to need help on the last weekend of the playoffs. Like you said, the whole AFC is kind of tiered out that way where you could be in that spot.
Yeah, I don't know if that adds up to much hope against Buffalo.
No, I don't think
Steelers are what? Boy, the line's moving all over the place, isn't it?
Oh, well, we did the podcast last night. It was 10, and I did not check this morning. Where is it now?
Last time I saw it was 8.5.
That's interesting. I wonder why.
The Steelers getting 10 was always going to bring in a lot of money. Because it's the Steelers.
Well, you know what? That's a good point, because we got to remember this isn't about who the bookies think will win. This is about the bookies feeling how much money can we bring in and setting it
evening out the betting on either side. So Buffalo has a good defense. That's the one thing I think is going to kill the Steelers. Their run defense ain't great. It's like 26th or whatever. But their yardage defense is 10th. Their scoring defense is 5th. And I just don't think the Steelers score enough to win this game or even really come close.
Yeah, I'm feeling something like 30-17, something like that. So the 10-point margin is kind of close. I still think the Bills probably cover. But then again, I mean, you look at spreads across the National Football League, you put them in double digits, the underdogs cover a lot. And, you looked at Matt Williamson, who you have on your show all the time. I do the pregame show with. I do a show on ESPN Pittsburgh with him. He always talks about the spreads in these last games, these Week 18 games, where the teams that have nothing to play for frequently cover.
Yeah, because once you get out there, pride takes over. If you're a second stringer, you want to prove yourself, get the coach's attention. So I kind of get that.
Or Derrick Henry, you want to run all over Jacksonville one more time in the AFC South before you go somewhere else.
Yeah, it's his last game with Tennessee, more than likely. So I understand that stuff. But as far as the Steelers making a game of it against Buffalo, I mean, I don't think T.J. Watt's absence will hurt like people think it will. Okay, really, I've said for years the sack is the most overrated play in football. It doesn't really matter unless you get it on third down. Otherwise, the yardage is too easy to make up. If you came to me and said, okay, you can pick T.J. Watt or Minka Fitzpatrick to play a playoff game against Buffalo, but not both. I mean, of course you want both. This is kind of a dumb question. Also, the stuff talk radio is based on. I'd rather have Minka against Buffalo, for sure.
I fear that he's not as close to 100% as he might be saying, as much as we might be wishing him to be.
That makes the argument different, yeah, but obviously Watt's hurt, so whoever can play will.
No, I think that, hey, Minka's back is, to use a phrase you used earlier, a bit of fool's gold, because if he was close to 100%, he's playing last week against Baltimore. He was not close last week, so I don't know how close he can be this week. And I'd like to know exactly the nature of his knee injury compared to what Watts is, so we can kind of see a parallel.
Maybe they could tie their bad legs together and have a three-legged race.
would you put him in the back there?
Devontae Casey back. He committed one felony. We can only hope for recidivism.
Yeah, and I wonder how Davis is. I don't remember if he came back into the game last night or not. I was kind of doing a million different things at Channel 4 while that was going on. But the Josh Allen factor, we'll come back to TJ a little bit later on, but the Josh Allen factor, man, you saw both sides of Josh Allen in half one and half two of that game, didn't you?
Yeah, but it usually adds up to winning, don't it?
No, and I don't think they'll win because of that. I think he's the most dynamic player on the field. And, we saw him help torture the Steelers last year in Buffalo, and that was the year before. Watt was the best guy on the field when he was fully healthy, and they upset Buffalo in the opener. So, again, coming back to TJ Watt, you've often made that point that you brought up about the sack being overrated. But the thing of it is, the entire Steelers defense is predicated on pressure, and I doubt that the combination of Golden and Herbig generate that much pressure.
Yeah, but I don't think they're chopped liver either, those two.
They're better than what they've tried in the past.
Yeah.
They're not chopped liver, although
At least they didn't quit and demand out at midseason.
And then that guy got a sack yesterday, too, of Josh Allen. Did you see that?
Well, I mean, the thing with Josh Allen is I really respect the way he plays quarterback because he doesn't act like throwing a pick will give him an STD. He's not out there looking to do it, but at least bucks the trend of ultra-conservatism that, frankly, has neutered Steelers quarterbacks, well, ever since Ben retired, for sure. Ben used to go against that grain on his own, but the Steelers, about how many years ago, Tim, just decided no turnovers ever. Bad things could happen.
Since the moment Ben's elbow exploded. That's how they
approached 2019. Yeah, probably right.
That they changed the game plan to kind of make that the case for Ben's last year when he came back. And then the last 2 years when they came back, actually. And then that carried over to Pickett, Trubisky. And honestly, Rudolph has that approach too, Mark. It's just that he hasn't thrown any interceptions. He's been really good about it. We barf praise all over Kenny Pickett for never throwing a pick. Rudolph hasn't thrown a pick yet. And they're actually getting points and they're getting yardage too. So I said the same thing you said on the DVE morning show today, where Allen is a throwback quarterback. Like, I don't know if you were listening to the broadcast yesterday. They played that clip from Vic Fangio where he accidentally called Josh Allen John Elway on steroids. I don't think he meant it, but that's the phrase that he used. It is kind of that way, though. Like he is not afraid to make a mistake, and by virtue of that,
that's the way quarterback's supposed to be.
Yeah,
that's Terry Bradshaw. That's fun.
That's Brett Favre.
That's entertaining football.
And the Steelers were sunk into the morass of the exact opposite of that. And to his credit, granted, against two poor defenses and against some backups, that's what the case was. Mason Rudolph has managed to walk that line between getting big plays and avoiding the turnovers, which has to make the Steelers coaches as happy as anything.
Well, I just hope he wins this game or at least makes it close, because then maybe people can make a case for him, and really they already can, as the starter for next year.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to go too far over.
I do, because Kenny Pickett stinks. I talked about that on the podcast. I don't want to make Rudolph the starter based on 3 games. I want to make Rudolph the starter based on Kenny Pickett's 24 starts.
Yeah, what I was going to say is I don't want to make it sound like we have to put a big couch on everything that Rudolph has done based on who he plays. But at the same time, if he goes out there and doesn't play well, he's going to Buffalo to play a playoff game in probably crappy weather against a really good team. So I don't think that should be an indicator.
Well, right, and he got him there. He got him that game. Mason Rudolph is the Steelers' MVP for the year. He started 3 games. He's absolutely the MVP for the year.
And he
contributed more to them making the playoffs than anyone else.
An undercurrent story that maybe hasn't gotten that much attention, I think in large part because the game was on a Saturday. Everything else played out on Sunday, but something that nobody is talking about and hasn't been able to bring up the opposite really is George Pickens didn't say crap after not getting a target. You know what I mean? Like
that was weird, wasn't it? I mean, I understand why Baltimore just concentrated on him, but like Rudolph talked after the game like he had no problem reeling Pickens in.
And Pickens seemed to be okay with it, and that is a story. And I don't know.
Well, it was right now.
I don't know how they're going to distribute the ball. I know one thing they have to be careful of, based on how I saw them use him last night on defense, with or without Minka, whatever combination of inside linebackers they throw out there. Kincaid was a lot all over the place in the second half where there were meaningful drives for Buffalo, and they have to be cognizant of that.
By the way, how about Deontay loafing off the field on that punt?
Oh, that cost him a delay of game or too many men on the field or so. It was too many men on the field.
It was a great punt. Harvin shanked the next one. It cost him, I think, 28 yards.
Yeah, yep. I did see. That's a good point. Yep, absolutely.
What a dink. What a me first douche.
Yeah, the receivers, for as much right as they have done over the past couple weeks or months, they do give you reason still every week to talk about them and have somewhat of a negative spotlight on them.
Well, but that's the Steelers. I mean, those guys, like I said, are front and center in that locker room.
So bottom line, Mark, you're looking at this more as, praise for the Steelers for pulling themselves back from the playoff ledge, or is it more condemnation of how they put themselves in a position where they needed help again in Week 17?
I see it as them giving me another chance to make money from a viewing party, which will be at Celebrations in Imperial.
Wait, is that what you call your spiritual home? Is that
my spiritual home in
Beaver County?
No. That is Zuki's.
Zuki's. Oh, I'm sorry. Zuki's. Okay.
Right. Celebrations is my go-to. Imperial's not Beaver County, is it?
I didn't think it was, but I was conflating the two in my head.
I think of the margarine. Imperial. The guy suddenly wears a crown. So people who always think I want the Steelers to lose, well, they're in the playoffs, and I'll be getting more money for it, and you won't, because it's what's best for business. But, do I think they'll make a game of it? For a half, probably. Don't you? Now the X factor, like always, is the weather.
Yeah.
And even if Buffalo's used to playing in bad weather, they don't play in bad weather that often. It's not like it snows every game in Buffalo. Not like it's freezing every game in Buffalo. I tend to think the bad weather affects the favorite more adversely, that it tends to narrow the gap, don't you?
I do, because I guess the best way to say it is if you are the favorite, then it's probably because you have better skilled players. And skilled players oftentimes are neutralized or at least marginalized by the bad weather. It brings everybody into the middle. And to that end, I think maybe you lean more on the Steelers' running game. Maybe the Steelers' running game is able to be more impactful because the Bills can't score quite as quickly because perhaps their skill guys are somewhat neutralized by the conditions. Now, from what I understand, though, it's actually supposed to be even worse in Kansas City. But the weather aside, Mark, I still would have preferred them actually to go to Kansas City and play in Arrowhead against the Chiefs. That sounds weird. I just think the depth of weaponry for the Chiefs isn't what it has been. And actually, there's more variables for the Bills on offense these days than the Chiefs. Basically, it's Mahomes and Kelsey for the Chiefs right now. And
Who's Kansas City play?
Kansas City has the Dolphins.
Yeah, that could be an upset.
Yeah, I'm interested to see who comes
Miami
back.
can score with Kansas City. Miami has more weaponry.
Yeah, now there the weather comes into play too. We'll see how that goes for them, and they're not used to playing in it. And then the other game in the AFC is what then? It's Houston hosting Cleveland. That's going to be a really interesting game, especially with Stroud healthy at quarterback now.
Well, you got Stroud healthy, you got Flacco near dead.
Just by age alone.
Yeah, what if Flacco dropped back to pass and just keeled over?
We've got to get. I guess though, if the Steelers were to win, then you're not going to get Cleveland against Baltimore next week. You could get it next week if the Steelers lose.
If the Steelers were to win, give me a break.
I'm throwing it out there, but I mean, I want to see Flacco against the Ravens. Definitely.
One thing, let's make no mistake, too. The only way this is a successful season for the Steelers is if they win this game.
Well, that's what I said. You need a playoff win to make this different because everybody and their mother was predicting between 9 and 11 wins. I had them at 10, you had them at 9.
Well, never mind the predictions. You need a playoff win just so it's not another typical Steeler mess season.
Yeah, basically it's the same thing that they've done. They're just getting in with a 10th win as opposed to getting in or being out with a 9th.
I wrote a column in the Trib that Cowher clearly did a better job than Tomlin, only because Cowher clearly did a better job than Tomlin. And one thing that I think underlines it as much as any difference between the two, Cowher never went more than 3 years without a playoff win. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, he had the 3-year drought.
On 6 and counting right now.
Yeah, he had the 3-year drought, and I think what was the longest for Noel after he took over? 5, I guess it was, from 84 to 89. But he won in 84, he won in 89. That was the stretch in between. So
I don't know, Tim. Those were my party during the Steelers games years, so I don't remember exactly.
Let's get to some Penguins, Mark, before we get some comments. I see a ton of comments coming in, so I'll get to as many as I can, but I want to talk some Penguins, too. You said on the podcast the power play is still broken. I know it's scored in 3 straight games, but I think the number is still 5 of its last 33, if you look at it collectively.
Well, it scored 5 on 3 the other night. But, here's one thing they did that was weird during that 5 on 3. Because it was a full 2-minute 5 on 3, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know what the attitude has to be there? We need to score twice. And they didn't run the hurry up 5 on 3 to try to get as many shots as possible to leave them the 5 on 4 to get another goal. That's how I would have approached it anyway.
I think that should be the case anytime there's a 5 on 3. And I do think the power play is still struggling.
5 on 3 of a minute or more, yes.
Yeah, and I still think the power play is struggling more than what the numbers have put out there in recent games. I still think you go back a few, and it still tells the tale that it's got a long way to go to being what it should be, because what it should be, Mark, is top 5, and it's bottom 5.
You know what's funny, Tim? I'm tired of talking and writing about it because it frustrates me that they just don't see that it sucks. Or they do, and this is the much more likely scenario. They do see that it sucks and won't make the changes necessary because that would upset some of the names.
Oh, Mark, it's the same thing as we were talking about the Steelers' offense for the first 10 weeks of the season.
Yeah, well, no, this is worse because no, it is because these guys have real players. Okay, well, here's what you need to do. You need to say Sid's on the right circle. And boy, I'm saying this all the time. And then you construct around that. But they won't do that because 71 gets upset. And that's the only reason. Believe me, Tim, that is the only reason Sid's not in the right circle. The only reason. They know it's the right thing to do, and they don't want Gino to be a baby.
What if he wasn't okay with it? Because we all know Sid's okay with it because he doesn't want to upset Malkin.
I don't care who's okay with it.
No, but I'm saying what if Sid were to make noise about it and kind of push that as well?
He's just not gonna. He's as guilty of this as anybody.
He's complicit in his silence?
Tim, you're kind of equating it to a murder mystery, but yes, I suppose so.
Well, they killed the power play. I know that. Every time they have a man advantage, it gets murdered. It gets stabbed in the back before they even drop the puck.
This is out of left field. I would give thought to Letang up top and bench Carlson.
Yeah, it hasn't worked the way we all thought it would, right?
You brought him in to fix the power play, and he can't. And you know why he can't? I never thought this would be the case. He's a Hall of Fame defender, right? for sure. 3 Norris trophies. He's in the Hall of Fame. He defers all the time. He's intimidated by Malkin and Crosby. Not because they go out of their way to do so. That's just in his mind.
Is it because he hasn't been used to playing with other great players and he got 30 goals last year because there are very few other options?
I don't know. I can't imagine why he would be. I expected the opposite, which would have been a good thing.
What about the Flyers tonight? What do you make of the Flyers?
Well, one last thing, Tim. Carlson should have got into practice and said, you guys don't know bleep all about the power play. I've watched tapes. You suck. Here's how we're doing it.
Yeah, maybe that's just not his personality. I thought it might be, based on, coming out of San Jose. Wasn't there that rub between him and Burns allegedly about, who should be more in charge? Wasn't that kind of the deal?
No, I think that's just because Burns is a dink.
Oh, okay. All right. So,
but the Flyers, they better beat the Flyers. They're 0-2 against the Flyers, both, loser points this year, but the Flyers are ahead of them.
Yeah, and they've only got 2 more games against them, 1 more after tonight. I think it's in February at some point, and they gotta make hay when they can against teams between them and the playoff brackets. They're still in 7th in their own division. I don't think they're going to make
it. I mean, as always, I live in hope because that's the team I support, but I don't think they're going to make it. You don't lose consecutive home games to Washington and Buffalo and make the playoffs.
Real quick, Mark, you going to bother putting on the championship game after the Penguins tonight, or no? Does that not interest you at all?
What championship game?
Michigan and Washington.
Oh, no, I don't even care.
No? All right. I might watch. Penix kind of is curious.
What time's it on?
Let's see. I think that one's on at like 8:20 or something like that.
No, I'm out.
Yeah, second half after the game between the Penguins and Flyers. Oh, by the way, forecast in Buffalo for Sunday. High of 23, overcast, kind of high, 15 to 25 mile an hour winds.
That's not terrible. I mean, it's not optimum, but it's not terrible. It's like the Ice Bowl.
Jeremy says the Steelers need to win a playoff game in order for this to be a successful season. Does a playoff win negate Mike Tomlin's losing to bad teams this season? Does a playoff win negate Mike Tomlin's losing?
Playoff win just makes it a good season. I'm not going to go specifically what it negates and doesn't. Yeah. If you win, it's a good season. Why can't we just keep it that simple?
Yeah, I mean, I put the barometer at 10 wins and a playoff loss. So if you give me 10 wins and a playoff win, I'll be happy. Yeah, especially with the way things transpired in the middle of the season. Dino says the Steelers have quite an uphill battle in front of them. Or as my grandma says, I don't even know what that is.
I think he's saying his girlfriend on the side, his Gumar.
I thought he said his grandma. It's like the Sopranos, right?
No, he's saying Gumar.
Well,
I have no idea what that phrase means. So let's just
maybe we should get it off the screen then if we don't know what it means.
That's right.
Alex says, look, Mason is not the answer. He'd be 28th best starter in the league, maybe. Kenny would be 31 or 32. This team is crap.
Okay, Kenny Pickett is the worst starting quarterback in the league. Well, there might be put it this way. I guarantee without, looking at all the stats and video, he's bottom 3. Mason Rudolph might be as bad as you described. Right now, he's playing like a top half of the league starter.
That's
no question about that.
Do you think they've already made up in their mind that Kenny Pickett will be the starter next year?
Yeah, don't you?
Yes, I do. I think they will hire a coordinator that they think amplifies what he's got, and they will talk themselves into thinking that will happen next year.
There's only one chance that they, well, maybe not even then, but I'll tell you when the pressure would be turned up is if Rudolph wins this game.
Yeah, if he takes them on a run, and even that run is just one game, that might have to change the narrative because he would have then done that something that Ben Roethlisberger and Kenny Pickett and anybody else they tried didn't do, and that's win a playoff game for the last 7 years. Alex says Najee and Jones might beat the Bills. Like, lean into Najee, and I think you might have something. But
well, you know when that works? I mean, could work. Put it this way. If the Steelers can score first or get up by 10, better yet, then that running game could keep it close the whole way.
Yeah, the running game has been...
I bet the Bills know that.
Yeah, I think the running game, especially with the way that Najee had been performing, I know there's some ball handling issues for everybody that affected the Ravens too. I'm dying to see how that offensive line performs against Buffalo. There are some beasts on that front line for Buffalo. And they relied a lot on after contact yards for Harris in the game against Seattle. 118 after contact yards. They're not going to get that against the Bills.
Oh, excuse me. No, no, they're not. I mean, like, Tim, anything we say to imagine that the Steelers are going to win this game, we are doing exactly that, imagining. I mean, but I mean, let's hope they make a fist of it. Let's dream up ways they can. My scenario, running the ball up by 10 early. I mean, if they got up by 30 early, I bet they would have a good chance to win even. But we're dreaming here, so let's dream big.
Yeah, and he says, I think he meant Johnson there. I mean, I don't know about Johnson. This has to be a Pickens-involved game. It can't just be one big play from Deontay Johnson for your offense and try to outgrind the Bills or whatever the case. They got to get Pickens involved here. Freiermuth has to be involved. They got to have multiple options to keep the Bills guessing as much as anything if they're going to stay alive.
By the way, I just looked this up, explaining my distractedness for a second. The weather conditions of the Ice Bowl in Green Bay, which I believe was 1967, the NFL championship game between Green Bay and Dallas, minus 13. Minus 13, ice on the field, wind chill of minus 48, and 50,000 people still showed up. That was the era where people were stupid and really had nothing to do at all.
I try to remember that game as fondly as I can through the pictures. I mean, I wasn't alive when it happened, but it's not a completely different approach that they might have to try to keep this one low scoring. And like you said, let the elements play to them. Let the elements play to their skills, which might be leading on the run game and leading on Najee. If you met Broderick Jones, that's the first time I've ever heard somebody say a right tackle is going to win a game before. So,
yeah, but you know what? He is the catalyst for that running game. The stats, since he got a right tackle, since he starts, Tim, for the running game are just doubled. They're doubled. He's the guy. Who is this here? This is Richard, who says the power play will be the biggest reason why the Penguins missed the playoff and possibly start the rebuild process of the team. Oh, great analysis, Richard.
That's a huge rebuild, and there's a lot of cap work to be done if they're ever going to rebuild it. Although I guess you floated that idea, Mark, out before by trading Jake if they do that at the deadline, and then trading.
There are people like Mike Rupp, okay, expects them to trade future at the deadline for help now and do that indefinitely until Crosby, Malkin, and Letang retire, to dig the hole as deep as possible, to do like the Viking funeral with the core.
Char says, I will not be surprised if they start Kenny on Sunday.
No, they're not going to do that.
I wouldn't be. I had floated that idea out there even after the first win against Cincinnati. The way it's played out and the fact that Mason has played as well as he has, and to underscore what you were saying earlier, Mark, he's the reason why they've been winning. They're not just winning in spite of him. That takes that off the table.
They're winning because of him. Now, you know what's funny though, Tim? In the fourth quarter of that game, after the touchdown, was the Johnson touchdown in the fourth quarter? It was, wasn't it?
Yeah, wasn't it the first play of the fourth quarter?
Yes, I think it was.
Okay.
Anyway, when they scored and I started to, think they were going to definitely win, I said to myself, boy, his Mason Rudolph played well enough where he's definitely going to start the playoff game, or will they go back to Kenny? I didn't realize how good his stats were. I mean, especially considering the weather conditions. To go 18 of 20 in that weather is pretty incredible. And you know why he did it, Tim? Because he has much bigger hands than Kenny Pickett.
Rudolph will get annihilated against Buffalo, says Mark.
Okay, maybe. So what? You think Pickett would beat him? No. That's the implication there from that dork, who I guarantee went to Pitt and has a diploma and now waits tables, because that's what most Pitt graduates do. He might get annihilated against Buffalo. Buffalo's really good. That doesn't change the fact that Rudolph is the team MVP and the reason they're in the playoffs.
That undercurrent from Pitt fans and Pickett supporters, I think it's always been there throughout his time as a starter, Mark, but it has been amplified to an unreal degree over the past 2 weeks. As soon as Rudolph threatened him, that's when it really came out, because I don't think those folks ever felt threatened by Trubisky. Let me put it to you that way.
Which is why we're living in great times. And like these Pitt fans, okay, Pitt is a pathetic football institution because of its coach and because of its fans. I like some of the players. I like the program. Like I was at my appearance at All-Star Sports Bar and Grill in Robinson. No, not Robinson. South Point for the Steeler game. Donovan McMillan was there, the Pitt safety, who's really good. I talked with him, took a picture. Real nice kid, real good player. I like Pitt football. I just hate Narduzzi. And as far as the fans being so obsessed with Pickett's success or failure, why don't you channel that into actually going to games? So most nights when you're at home, it's not a joke how many empty seats there are.
Finally, Eric says, it would not shock me to see Buffalo be the 4th playoff team in a row to drop 40 on the Steelers.
Ooh.
There, I gave you one to end on, Mark.
Now you're talking, right? That I said that actually on Twitter about TJ Watt because people were saying, oh, they don't have a chance without TJ Watt. And I go, okay, maybe, but he was on the field for their last 3 playoff games and the defense allowed 40 or more every time. And that's not to blame him, but you always have to note that he was out there too. It reminds me like when, Joe Thornton never won a Stanley Cup. Okay, there's a reason for that. He was on those teams. Ray Bork never won a cup in Boston. Well, did you see him play against Gretzky and Lemieux in big games? There's a reason for that. We always try to absolve the guy we like when bad things happen, but he was out there too.
All right, that'll do it for this week's Madden Benz Unfiltered. Join us next week. We'll be talking about the result in Buffalo. Again, we are brought to you, as always, by Rush to Crush Cancer. It's more than a ride. It's a mission. Join us May 19th for the Rush to Crush Cancer bike ride. To register, go to rushtocrushcancer.org and help us in the fight against cancer. Join the ride.
Tim, I will donate. I will not ride.
I would love to see it. We should get a tandem bike and ride.
No chance.
All right. Mark's on 3 to 6 today. Listen to his show and check me out on the pregame show in advance of the game, which is at 1. So we're on at 9 o'clock on Sunday morning.